So just to start, I'll give a little overview here of our agenda. We'll start, and I'll give a little background on EAIGG and share some programming updates on where we're at. Then I'll turn the floor over to Anik, our executive director, who will head the panel discussion with our guests, with Miriam Vogel and Giovanni Leoni. And then we'll turn the floor over to all of you to have an open discussion, and we can ask some questions and have a little more of a free space to talk. So for those of you who aren't familiar, EAIGG is, we launched about a year ago now. And it started with a very small group, a core group of roughly 13 last fall, concerned with how to integrate ethical components of AI for venture investors and for enterprises and for startups into their screening processes, into how they're looking at this broader space as it's evolving. Back then, it was more of a sparse landscape. There's certainly been more organizations that have joined the scene in these last 12 months. But it was important for us to have a practitioner-led organization that was really grounded from those that were developing solutions, that were rolling out solutions, that really understood the trade-offs over there. So we're a community platform of AI practitioners, entrepreneurs, and technology investors dedicated to sharing practical insights and promoting the adoption of responsible AI governance across our industry. You'll notice our logo wall's grown a little bit over here. We have some members from Meta, from Google, from IKEA that have joined, and many more behind that as well. We have two groups. We have the internal group. This is the core of 13, which is now, it's curated. That has grown to 160 members now. And we have a broader group of 800 that's on LinkedIn as well with a company page. It's global in scope. This represents 42 countries. And you'll see the division, certainly in the curated group, is roughly evenly split, 1/3 startup entrepreneurs that are developing AI solutions, enterprise executives that are acquiring and deploying those solutions, and then venture investors and corporate venture investors that are financing those. We do have another sliver over here, which represents, let's say, policy folks, AI ethical consultants. There is sort of this other category, but we're proud of the split that we have here, and we do try and maintain that. When it comes to our programming, this is grassroots, and we're trying to develop programs that feed the needs of our members along these category areas, those stakeholders. So one of the first projects that we've done is the Ethical AI Database, which is a first of its kind effort to map this budding landscape of ethical AI startups. For this, we've actually teamed up with Abhinav Raghunathan from UPenn, grad student who's done excellent work. This is coming out on a quarterly basis. Many of you may actually be in this market map, and if you're not and you think you should be, please be in touch, and we'll see where you slot in. This is again coming out on a quarterly basis. It's available on our website. We've had some good traction over here. The other program that we've done recently is we've teamed up with our board member Anna Philander, who's really done some amazing work externalizing risk for governments, banks, enterprises, and she's developed an enterprise health diagnostic. So they have a freemium enterprise health diagnostic to help enterprises understand where the risks lie in their AI development and deployment processes. And more recently, they've actually developed a sandbox to safe test readiness against the impending EU regulations that are coming out. So be sure to check that out as well. That's available on the website. And the other piece that we've done in-house is we teamed up with Ethical Intelligence to develop an ethics maturity continuum. And this is an effort for startups who want to get a sense of where do they stack up. This is really across five dimensions here of accountability, intentional design, fairness, social impact, and trust and transparency. So companies can see how do they score and how they're progressing over time. It's also very valuable for investors who want to use this as a screening tool, or even within their portfolios on a rolling basis to sort of do a diagnostic check. More recently, we launched our annual report, which encapsulates sort of best of breed of these different perspectives that we mentioned, the enterprise, investor, and startup perspectives. We've also layered on a policy perspective, which we think is key, and we'll have certainly a deeper discussion on that today with Miriam and Giovanni. This has had broad circulation and really represents some of the best folks that we have in our group. The other piece that we've done is we've done some physical and virtual events. Our virtual events have been roughly one every 2 months or so, events like these where we bring folks from the industry. And also some physical events. We have a few that are planned for Q1 of next year, and we'll be sure to share that information with you as it matures. We've had some appetite from members to consult us on as they do their own programming, as they're out there in the ecosystem doing programming on AI, and they want to layer on an ethical component. We've helped our partners to develop either panel discussions, some customized programming, and if you guys are in that boat and you want some resources over there, we'd be happy to support you on that. So feel free to be in touch. And that kind of wraps it for the organizational update. And with that, I'll pass the floor to Anik.
Great, thanks, man. Thank you all for joining today. The panel discussion topic is the policy approach to AI regulation, and we're thankful to have Miriam Vogel join us. She's the president and CEO of Equal AI, and she's also the chair of the National AI Advisory Committee. And then we've also got Giovanni Leoni, who's the global head of AI ethics at IKEA, and I think they're doing some very, very interesting work in this area. The way we've kind of structured this is we're going to have a 30-minute session followed with audience Q&A. So let me basically get started here, and maybe just to kind of set the context. AI, we believe, is a double-edged sword. It has tremendous value creation potential, but it also poses serious risks around bias, explainability, privacy, if it's not developed and deployed responsibly. And obviously, regulation is on the horizon, early in Europe. And perhaps this will be a GDPR moment, like the way kind of GDPR regulation evolved first in Europe and then came to the US. And all three of us, Miriam, Giovanni, and myself, we share a mutual passion on ensuring that AI is developed and deployed ethically in the industry. And we're thrilled to have them join today, sharing their perspective on how AI regulation is shaping and unfolding in both the Europe and the US. So maybe the first question to start off here, Miriam, is to basically get your thoughts on how you're basically seeing regulation unfold. Obviously the EU has been a little bit more aggressive. The Washington tends to be a little bit more timid in regulation as a whole in the US because there's this fear on curtailing technology innovation. What's your views in terms of, is there real appetite in Washington to raise, ethical standards on behalf of consumers, and what are some of the key drivers of basically policy in Washington?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to join you. I'm so interested in the work that you're doing and look forward to further looking into the ethical AI company map and the due diligence screening, just really important work. And I'm so excited to be collaborating with you. So thank you for asking this question. I think a lot of people assume that DC is asleep at the wheel, that the regulation doesn't exist, won't exist, at least not in the near term. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that both the US government, the states, as many of you in California know, in New York, in Chicago know, there are state laws underway, there's international efforts underway. So we will certainly be seeing, without a doubt, I would say, more AI-specific regulation in the very near term. But I also am sympathetic and realize that's not soon enough for those who are mid-deployment. You need advice today. And for that, I would say, we actually do have a lot of laws on the books. And we're starting to, so I should step back and say Equal AI looks at reducing bias in artificial intelligence. That's what we were founded for over 4 years ago. And we do that by looking at three main stakeholders to support. One is policymakers. We want to help those who are interested in establishing the guardrails establish that balance of supporting innovation, but precluding harm and avoiding mass producing discrimination through AI. We work with lawyers to help them support companies. So if you have lawyers interested in supporting you, they don't know where to start, please send them to us. We would love to support them. We have a CLE, a continuing legal education program for lawyers that's California accredited. It's really a priority for us, because of my bias as a lawyer, perhaps, to ensure that lawyers are a partner in this effort. And a lot of our work is helping companies realize they are now an AI company. They, as such, need to have a responsible AI governance system in place. And I would argue that we need to look at the laws currently on the books, in addition to those coming down the pipeline. So you can look at a variety of civil rights laws. The Americans with Disability Act, for instance, requires that your AI technology have accommodations. So if there's voice recognition, we know that it's going to have problems picking up certain intonations, certain voice levels, let alone speech impediments. So there are a wide variety of laws currently on the books that people who are deploying AI, using AI, need to be very mindful and careful about to help them figure out what is acceptable within the current legal landscape today. In addition, you can see New York City has, come January, a new law for hiring AI. We see that other states are following suit and starting to monitor and put additional protections in place. And finally, I would say we've even seen significant movement from the White House with their release last month of the Blueprint Bill of Rights to make sure that consumers are aware and companies are aware of consumers' rights and protections that they are due in this space.
Thank you, Miriam. Maybe a question for you, Giovanni. Obviously, Europe seems to be adopting kind of a GDPR-style approach with the AIA, seeking to categorize high and low-risk AI systems into certain buckets. And they've released also an AI liability directive, attempting to assign responsibility and accountability to different actors in the AI supply chain. How are enterprises like IKEA preparing for some of these impending regulations? Would love to get your perspective.
Thanks, and thanks a lot for being part of this conversation. It's very, I think it's highly important that we take our time to have these conversations, and also to broaden the perspective globally. What we can see is that both the AI Act and the Directive for AI Liability, but also a lot of other digital acts, goes along the same kind of momentum. How to, in a better way, create a society with digital components that we can trust, that we can give more autonomy and power towards the individual. So one needs to see this at a bigger perspective, that it's moving towards creating a checks and balance on the movement of technology, to also see how we can, in the best way, create practices and processes to support the individual. So seeing from that bigger perspective, the ambition of the AI Act and the Directive of AI Liability is really to see, okay, how do we create these checks and balances? And how do we really take both the advantage of technology to be as modern as possible, as efficient, as productive as possible, while at the same time not letting it create a negative impact on individuals and society as such. So it's really seeing how to find a good balance between the two. The good part is that being part of a company like IKEA, and for myself working for Inter IKEA Group, the part of the franchisor of the IKEA system, we are very happy to see this movement going ahead. We're rooted in corporate values that are really seeing how we can make better everyday life for the many people. And in a digital context, that means that we want to create better decisions with data and technology to create a positive impact on people, planet, and society. So it goes along the same ambitions that we have. And the approach that we have had in looking upon the AI Act and the Directive of AI Liability, and also other digital acts, but let's focus on those two, has been really to see that we support the movement and sentiment in seeing that it is to have a benefit for the individual, whether that is a coworker, a customer, a user, whomever comes in contact with an AI system. Let's focus upon the specifics of how you define AI, or how we define a high or low risk, because towards the end, it doesn't really matter, because any AI system will meet the individual and society. The important part is, how do we gear up processes and ways of working, control steering, so we can in the best way know how to use AI in a way that it doesn't create negative outcomes. And I think this is one of the things that have been quite challenging in terms of the movement of development of the AI Act. A lot of focus upon the definitions and who along the value chain of AI creation should have the responsibility. But towards the end, AI is just a tool. What matters is how we design it, how we develop it, and how the outcomes ends up in the context where it's used. And there, I think there's a responsibility of any entity, organizations, public or private, to see how do we take responsibility of the contextual situation of utilizing an AI system, and see how do we create processes in the best way to manage the outcomes, whether that is and to be having a control, as the great work that done within Equal AI, having a control over the data, control over the utilization of models, but also seeing really that we are controlling the outcome of the use of it.
Great, thank you. Interesting about this conversation is, there's been a lot of talk about it, and when you think about policy priorities, it's different depending on the lens that you apply here. So in your view, Miriam and Giovanni, please take a crack at this. In second or less, how would each of you enumerate what the top 3 policy priorities should be with regard to ethical AI or responsible AI?
Happy to jump in. I think if we only had one, the most important is AI needs to be created by and for a broader cross-section. I think that's how we ensure it's safe. That's how we ensure it's effective. That's how we ensure that more of our population is invited and involved in the participation of the benefits in its creation and the benefits of its deployment. So first and foremost, how do we make sure that there's more diversity, geography, age, ethnicity, race, of all different perspectives participating in the creation of AI? If I was permitted to add to that, I would say you all are, in my experience, uniquely sophisticated in understanding that you need to have responsible AI governance. I'd be curious to hear how frequent you're getting alignment with your colleagues, because I'm still finding a lot of the conversations I'm having are convincing companies that A, this is necessary, and B, a priority, not just something to think about in someday when there's time and space, but that it's an urgent situation, and that the AI they're building today will have consequences that they will have trouble unpacking in a few years if they do not put a governance system in place with all the right pieces, transparency, accountability, et cetera, today. The third thing I would ask for, in addition to clarity and adherence to responsible AI governance, I would ask for clarity and certainty on the rules and regulations. So I mentioned a few earlier. You also heard Giovanni talk about the EAIGG Act. There is regulation currently that is applicable. There are best practices and frameworks. I would hope that we could move more urgently so that those who are building AI systems can have the certainty in knowing what the expectations are.
Great. Giovanni?
Yeah, it's great points. I would want to copy those, and then I get another 3 on top of that. I want to build on what Miriam mentioned before. We have so many great policies and laws already. We just need to embrace the fact that it doesn't matter that we're going and utilizing advanced technology as AI. Human rights are still applicable. We need to kind of just embrace that. That is the key point, that we need to see that the impact and effect of the utilization of technology is still positive for the individual and the individual's livelihood. So I think that is one of the key thing is that we really take that as a foundation. The second part is that we need to acknowledge that this is complex. This is advanced technology is sometimes in many companies the knowledge of the few, and even if you buy products and services, is the knowledge of even someone outside of your company or organization. And we need to embrace that accountability, even if it's complex. Now, accountability to understand how it works and how we design and steer and control it. So that accountability, and that accountability comes with whomever is in the end of the line before meeting a human. to really take that for see that is rooted for it. And the last part, what I see is that is critical, is that we need to embrace the idea that ethical AI needs to be by design. We can't start as kind of building on what Miriam said, that sometimes it's hard to convince companies or stakeholders to use this, or that we need to see this as a separate unit or as a part of a compliance part of an organization. That's not it. We need to design and you to see how we can embrace data, models, and the use of it in business processes or processes meeting end users to be by design. And that means that it will demand innovation to maybe change things that have been a practice for 20 years. We maybe need to do it differently to make it by design going forward. It may be so that we lost Anik, maybe.
Did we lose Anik? Okay. 1 second. Let me see if I can pull up the questions myself. Okay, so I'll just jump in over here. So Miriam, this question's for you. So Washington tends to be more timid than Brussels when regulating or curtailing technology innovation. And the impetus for government action, especially on a federal level, is often framed in terms of national security or else innovation competitiveness with China. Is there a real appetite in Washington to raise ethical standards on behalf of consumers? What are the key drivers of policy in Washington?
Thank you for that question. And Anik, I'm glad to see you're back. Don't know if you want to add to that question or if I should jump in the response.
No, I think the one thing I'd like to add is I think you asked a question, Miriam, is what are we seeing with our colleagues around, the need for ethical AI, responsible AI. It's actually very, I think you're absolutely spot on, right? Which is we are very early in the cycle, and there's a lot of, even within enterprises, there's a lack of understanding of AI and what the downside risks are. I believe that when you think about the VC community, and I can speak for the financial VCs, I would say there's a greater level of understanding of this topic in Europe than there's with my colleagues in the US. I would also say that the corporate venture firms are probably a little bit further ahead of the curve on this because of the nature of the fact that they are actually, a lot of their companies and parents are actually implementing AI. So they're a little bit more connected with that. I think if I think about pure kind of, mostly, financial VCs in the US, I think it's a mixed bag. I think some view it as a toll tax, which will slow down innovation and have startups invest in anything that doesn't get them to product market fit. But I think the people who are smarter understand that VCs view in the business of underwriting risk. And there's 2 risks to AI startups. Number 1 is AI governance. You mentioned things around bias, explainability, and the second is on data privacy. And I think it behooves us to kind of those risks as part of the investment, and for the founders to do so. So that just responding to that, but just turn it back to the question.
Well, thank you. It's really helpful to get your input. It's always hard to know if when you're in a vacuum, is it just the people I'm talking to? And again, it feels so different. You talk to audiences like you all who deeply understand. We have our board member, Kathy Baxter, who day in, day out on this call is teaching everybody at Salesforce and everybody around the world about best practices, but you step outside of the bubble and I still get a lot of raised eyebrows. What do you mean trustworthy AI? It's AI, there's an implicit bias that it's scientific and accurate. And you ask about the DC piece, is there an appetite? Is there a readiness? Yes, I would say there is. I mentioned the AI Bill of Rights, and as you saw, that was a significant step forward in a recognition that consumers have rights. They have the right to be free from algorithmic discrimination. I mean, it's out there now. The White House has spoken on it. They talk about your right to safe and effective systems. It sounds like a platitude, but there is a lot we can build off of it now that that's been established. The mention as well, data privacy, a right to notice an explanation, alternative options. I mean, as you know from building the AI, none of these are simple concepts. These are all design challenges, and they are all commitments that we want to see realized. So how do we know that there's going to be next steps? Well, first of all, the White House said there will be. Second of all, you see agency action, at least in the US. You're seeing it across the globe. My answers are in response to this question about the US. So if you look across the agencies, you will see action. You will see the CFPB. You will see the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You will see a historic announcement last May between the EEOC and the Department of Justice. It was their first ever joint announcement where they put people on notice that they are on the lookout. EEOC announced an AI initiative in hiring AI systems last year. And so one of, the agency that's protecting civil rights in the hiring space, which company is not hiring? I mean, I would argue that almost impacts every company, not fully, but almost, because, if you're going to be hiring in the US and you have the applicable regulations where EEOC oversees you, or could, as you grow, you're going to want to be on notice that they're watching your AI use to make sure that you're compliant with all civil rights laws that they oversee. In addition, I think the significant action you'll see is with NIST. You've probably seen the AI risk management framework efforts they've had underway. I think it's one of the most impressive government activities I've seen in a long time, because they're going pretty quickly, considering that it's a novel concept for the AI to be standardizing AI practices. And come January, they will have finalized their AI risk management framework. So you can look online at the NIST website today to see. They've been very transparent. They have their second draft out. They have both a user guide and a framework. They have work underway to bring more use cases and make it even more applicable and understandable to various users and designers of AI. They have workshops online. Again, you can see Kathy led a great session. She's led 2 so far. I've led 2 so far. It's all online, so it's very transparent and intended to speak to a broad cross-section, but from industry experts to those who are newer, to academics, to those who approach ethics as a more philosophical concept. I mean, there's really room for everybody in the discussion. I see Navrina is on here too. She could certainly tell you from her discussions with NIST as well, how deeply integrated their work has been with those leading in the community and those who we want to participate in trustworthy, ethical AI. And so I would say come January, we will see a significant step forward with their risk management framework. I would also be remiss, and I will be quiet after this, if I did not point out that last spring they published Special Publication 1270, which I think is a spectacular document looking at bias in AI and really breaking down where it comes from and what you can do to avoid it.
Got it. Very helpful. Thank you. That's a great resource. I've seen. Looks
like we're having some technical difficulties here. Do you all still hear me? Make sure it's okay, great. So let's move along. We have about 10 minutes left before we turn it over to the audience here. So we have a couple of questions here left. I'll start with this one, the VC community. So the policy side is a bit foreign to the VC community, but there's certainly venture investors that are very keenly aware of the changes afoot. Many have begun to internalize this need to assign risk to the ethical components of AI, both in their screening process as well as their portfolio and board management practices. And here at EAIGG, we mentioned the maturity continuum that investors can use. There's certainly other frameworks that are out there to do some sort of screening, and there's different practices that are beginning to emerge. Do you both have practical advice for investors and even for startups in the space as they seek to develop AI solutions that will be compliant with the anticipated laws on both sides of the pond?
Giovanni, did you want to start? I've talked too much already.
Sure, I can briefly mention my point of view yesterday. So we also leave time for you to comment. I think I would summarize it with relevance, because in essence, what we need to have is a relevance in terms of the world outside. So policy movement is creating the shape of the world that and the rules of the game that is demanded upon any kind of startup, any kind of company. And I'm thinking being in tune with that reality creates a relevance to whatever company and startup. In the same way, it's also about a relevance towards the technology that one is to use. So that is in tune with its applicability in the policy context. And on a third line, it's about relevance in creating business value. Having business processes that are aligned with the policy demands out in the outside world, but also utilizing technology that is relevant to deliver into those business processes. It doesn't matter if you have a magical model in terms of AI, but if it's not in tune with the policy demand, then you can't use it. Or you have a perfect business process, but you can't make that work or make it augmented or efficient with the use of technology as of AI. And in the end, you can't even use it because it's not applicable or relevant to the policy context, whether that is in one nation or across the world. So I think it's about really being in the forefront, even before laws are determined, to see where is the sentiment going, where is the movement going, and also see how do one keep track of that to become as relevant as possible in the utilization of AI to deliver relevant business processes. And that is something that can be screened at a very early stage.
Thanks, Giovanni.
I'd like to second those. I would also say there's some really basic steps that the VC world is particularly well suited to take. Ask anybody who wants to do business with you, have you tested for basic legal protection? Have you tested to make sure that your AI systems are not discriminating against protected classes? That will be something that you will be liable for going forward. And so it's a smart way to protect yourself. It's also a smart way to make sure that your systems are inclusive. So whether it's your designers, those who are proposing the ideas, whether it's those who are selling you data, collecting your data, cleansing your data, whatever it is, anybody working with you on your team or as a partner, it's a really effective, I wish we could make this a business practice and expectation that someone's going to ask you, have you tested for bias? And testing against bias is too big. Testing against discrimination is too big. As a lawyer, I look at protected classes because those are legally defined expectations that you will be liable for within the US, but you can choose how broad you want to make that. On top of that, I would say you'd be well suited to practice and implement at an early stage what I call good AI hygiene, making sure that you have an accountability. Someone in your C-suite needs to be on top of your AI process. And it doesn't mean day in, day out, they're going to know everything happening in your AI, but it means that as you acquire, build, deploy, there's somebody who is accountable for whom there is a process in place, and they know that there is a process in place. People on your team know who to talk to when they find a problem. It's AI. It's going to iterate, create new patterns. It will have biases in it. Just making sure that there is a culture that is in place where you are able to hear where these problems are and address them, and give people the trust to know that if they raise them with even the senior level staff with C-suite, that they'll be heard and not punished. And the benefit is, once you build that trust with your employees, your consumers can then benefit from that trust and trust your systems accordingly. So I would say those are two things that everyone should do, and they will reap the rewards of not only avoiding lawsuits and terrible headlines that could end your companies, but also create a broader population that has trust in your brand.
I think it's very well said, Miriam. I think what's interesting is even in early stage startups, we try and see who owns the problem. And usually the founder who's driving product management owns it. They have to make sure that the algorithms are fair, there's not biased data sets, data privacy issues are being, dealt with, whether it's SOC 2 compliance or whatever it might be. And I think accountability is the first place where it starts. So I absolutely agree with you. And I think the second part of the equation is, I also believe where we are in AI today is very much like where we were with cybersecurity in the 1990s. Awareness was very low. You fast forward to today, every enterprise has a chief information security officer. It's a board level issue. And I hope that we will not take that long for AI to get there, because it will become a board issue. And I also believe what's going to happen is the fact that the need for either product management or having a chief a responsible AI officer is going to be important, because if we don't do that, it's not that you can get in a time machine, go back in time, and kind of fix everything and modify your algorithm in data sets, because you can't. And as a startup, it's important to address these on day one. So I agree with you 100%. So I know we're going to be, we're kind of coming close to the end of our questions here. I'd love to kind of open it up to the audience for questions. Feel free to send a chat or raise your hand to ask questions for Miriam and Giovanni.
And while you're looking at the questions, I just want to underscore the importance of that illustration of the cyber connection. Similar to the cyber connection of 15 years ago, when most companies did not realize they needed to have a cyber threat plan. When it happened, it was too late. So when the litigation starts to play out, when new AI laws are in place, as you all know, it will be too late. So even knowing who's underrepresented in your data, if you're talking about a financial AI, how much better off will you be to know, not that you can fix it immediately, but at least you'll know that the answers that the AI system is providing is underrepresented in certain populations, and you need to adjust accordingly or rely on it less when you're talking about certain zip codes, or you can adjust your use of the AI knowing where some of the gaps are, which you can only do if you ask early on who is under and overrepresented, what is in my data sets, for whom could this fail.
Got it.
May I ask the question?
Go ahead. I think Anna has a question. Anna?
Thank you, Anik, and thank you, Giovanni and Miriam. I really applaud everything you say here. I think that the cybersecurity reference is really important here, because the key, I would say, for meeting so many companies seeing this as a nice to have, not a need to have, but now soon we're on the other side of it. But you need to have a standardized reporting metrics. So when it comes to the board reporting on ethical or AI Act performance right now, you just need to have the ability to do that. If you would go to any tech team without the awareness and awakening, they wouldn't even know how to start measuring it. So we see in the ESG movement, they're kind to crystal out some metrics, and that's what we're working on, so that it would be easy to find this metric, compare it, and as for retail, that would be like best in class. You should be proud of representing these key risk indicators, just going really being reduced to the bottom. So I think that's reporting is very important to that. Have you seen anything? We want to make our reporting standard, of course, but Miriam and Giovanni, have you seen anything else? I know, Giovanni, you know our platform, but have you seen any other actor providing these kind of performance that you actually can benchmark towards other actors?
You want to start, Miriam?
Sure. I have seen progress on this front. I think if I'm understanding correctly, first of all, the connection with ESG, I couldn't agree more. I was privileged to write an article in the Harvard Law Forum on corporate governance with Bob Eccles on why AI needs to be a part of ESG considerations. The environmental impact that there is not yet often discussed, but I think the carbon footprint will become increasingly a liability and concern in years to come. The social piece, if you're not careful about your AI, you're discriminating. If you are careful and intentional, you're spreading innovation and opportunity. So it can go both ways. And then the governance, there has to be governance. So I think you're right that it's a perfect place to house these considerations. I think you're absolutely right. Board members, if you're asking, I have seen starting interest in board members. I've been asked to talk to more corporate board members and organizations. I spoke with the NACD, and I'm talking with another of their conferences at another of their conferences next month. So I do think there's an interest. I think what's going to happen is like in cyber, where there's corporate liability on the board level, but also the personal level for all the reasons that happen on occasion in cyber. So, you know, I'm coming from a general counsel perspective here. I'm trying to, like you, help companies get ahead of this, but we know those lawsuits are going to be coming. And at that point, I expect to see significantly greater interest among corporate boards, but it certainly is happening. And I am seeing an uptick.
Thanks. I think Dror had a question. Go ahead. Sorry, Giovanni. Go ahead, Giovanni.
No, I just a quick compliment to that. I think we just need to embrace the fact that we need to act as if everything can be reported. Everything should be transparent. Of course, everything will not leave the organization, but it needs to be transparent enough for those with utmost accountability to understand how it works, why it works, and to be able to take that full accountability for it. And then, depending upon the legal, the national context, you'll have a necessity to report on certain things. But the default should rather be that we're moving towards an idea of full transparency and auditability and being able to report on everything, at least internally to your own executives, and then to be able to be understood by non-technologists. And then some of that will also spill outside of an organization. So I think it's more to see that we're moving towards that point where we're moving from technologies owning the data or the metrics to rather being non-technologies being able to see what is to be reported on. So it's a kind of a paradigm shift.
Very well said, Giovanni. Dror, I know you had a question.
Yeah, so going back to the alignment with colleagues point, especially talking in big companies, it seems like you either work with or at big companies on that. And as we recognize, people that are not in this room may have a different perspective or a different level of understanding. First of all, if you are working with them, they have found that interest in that. I'm wondering, what do you observe their motivation, or why did they even engage with you? And then what do you perceive, or what they perceive as the biggest challenge when it comes to ethics? So that's two questions.
And I'm sorry. To clarify, why do companies want to work with us of different sizes?
I'm trying to understand, like, let's say a leader in a large company would come to work with you. What is their what is their motivation? What are they thinking about? Because they're not speaking in the same language you speak here, for example. And then even if they do that, what is their biggest challenge?
Great question. You know, I'm sympathetic. I understand if you're a VC, if you're a company that's a startup, we've been in startup mode. I understand your goal is to survive and to have value. It's very hard to think down the line. And so that's where I think the role that you all play is so key, because you do have the long view and you have the motivation of not wanting liability. So where do I see most executives coming into this? Part of it is we have a badge program for senior executives, and Kathy is one of our instructors and can share about it. It's one of the most fun things I've ever done, because it's executives who have self-selected, who want to figure out how to govern their AI responsibly. They come from a broad cross-section of industry. They sit in different roles. They are expected within their companies to innovate, and they are concerned because they see what's on their shoulders. They see the harms that they can have if they don't implement best practices immediately. And it's very hard right now, because we talked about some of the policy frameworks in place, but they have not been universally applied. We haven't seen a lot of the litigation transpire that will in the AI space, and we know not all the laws are settled. So why would someone jump in at this point? Well, first of all, there's employee retention. Employees don't want to be part of an algorithm or brand that is doing harm. They don't want to be a part of a brand that's known to be not inclusive. So if it's shown that your AI cannot see certain populations or doesn't represent, can't be beneficial, a lot of employees are starting to walk. And that is obviously one of our key commodities, one of our most valuable assets. The second is brand integrity. If people don't trust your AI system, how will they trust your brand? And, good luck trying to get that back once that's been breached. We know some of the largest tech companies have had some gaffes and have been able to come back, but could a startup? That's a big question. I don't know that many or most could. And then we see consumer base. I mean, there's the advantage that the more people you're testing for, the more people can benefit from your AI system. So it's a broader consumer base. It's a smart strategy. And finally, what we've been talking about a lot here today is the liability. So all those, I think people shake their head. It's interesting. It's nice. But when we talk about the liability, they lean in when you realize at some point, this will be found to be a material breach of contract if you have led to discrimination at a wide scale and you are deemed to be, and the courts are early stages on this and seem to be interpreting it different ways. Some say, well, it's not the AI provider's fault because they provided the AI and then it iterated on the client's data. You have, first of all, the problem that it's currently being litigated, and second of all, that it's being determined by judges who are not deeply comfortable with AI. And so we're going to see how it plays out, and it's going to be hit or miss. And is that something you want to be taking a gamble on, or do you want to mitigate the liability and harms and show that you have done your best to follow best practices known today with transparency, accountability, documentation, and so forth? I hope that answered your question. I know you said, why do companies care? And I think there was a second part, but
yeah, that was great. The second part was what is the biggest challenge? If you want to, if not, I would also, Giovanni, you are inside a giant company. Maybe you can tell your view.
No, I think that Miriam is mentioning brilliant points. I just want to second those. I think it really summarizes that a part of the challenge is that we need to drink our own Kool-Aid here. Like, we need to meet people where they are. We need to leave the fact that we can kind of keep ourselves to these philosophical dimensions or very technologist dimensions, but actually meet people where they are and meet them in their reality, with their words, and talk about sustainable business. And sustainable business comes from all of the points that Miriam was mentioning, and being able to build that in as a normal way of working, and meeting them and really talking about how do we create that together. And that means that we need to take in new tools and new approaches in a modern age that is fueled by advanced technology. And the challenge is when we do not meet people where they are, do not speak their language, their incentives, and their agenda, that's when we face challenges. So I think it's a responsibility up to every one of us that is in this field, is to actually see how we can interpret the specialist area we're within, and see how we can bring that into the corporate or organizational context where we meet these leaders, and see how can we make it relevant for them so they can make it by design in their way of working.
Yeah, and I think, well said, Giovanni and Miriam. To me, the biggest challenge here is to put it in non-technical terms, right? So why should anybody care? If you're an enterprise, you have brand and reputational risk if your AI model data sets go kind of, left field. The second reason, that will lead to market adoption, customer adoption issues. That's basically, the carrot. The stick is the liability, which is, if you look at the EU AI Act, you can get fined up to X% based on, where that's going. And I suspect what's going to happen is regulated industries understand this very well, and they will be early adopters. Unregulated industries we'll need time to figure that out. But I think going back to Giovanni's point, we have to put this in plain language. What is the value? Why, as a business exec, should you really care? And I think what's really interesting is they should care, because otherwise the issue about the brand and the market adoption, you can't buy those things back after the fact. I think there's a question here, Miriam, for maybe you and Giovanni, is, we've seen folks basically, some apply sandboxing as basically as a way for policy prototyping with a handpicked coalition of enterprise technology companies, right? Really bring the collaboration of tech companies and kind of policymakers. And I know Singapore has adopted the open loop system in partnership with Meta, and I think France is doing something with France 2030. What are your views on these sorts of sandboxes, and why they could be helpful or not?
Happy to jump in, Giovanni, unless you'd prefer. So I think it's a great idea. I think it has to be done carefully, because you don't want to create a place where people could be harmed. I mean, that I think is the bottom line and the balance there. I think there's a lot of benefit to this. Is an emerging technology, and this isn't a place where government has deep experience in particular. Now, they do have experience with regulating innovation. And so we're not starting from scratch here. We do have a lot of expertise. I like to remind people, if they're afraid to talk about AI, particularly lawyers, you can drive a car, you can advise a car company, you can help a car company, as a VC, even if you don't know how to build a car. And I think that's where we are with AI. And so the more that we can help it's easy for me to say, private-public partnerships, the better off we are. My other hat, I have the Equal AI hat, where we're working with companies to support Equal AI. The other piece is the National AI Advisory Committee, where we have 26 members who have been selected by the White House to advise the president in the White House on AI policy, and we're organized under the Commerce Department. And so you see how this group of, Navrina is one, and I think there are others in our group who also participate in yours. Salesforce is also participating. It's really deeply committed private sector individuals, because so much of this is happening in private sector. We also have academic practitioners who are adding so much insight, and civil society. And so it's this wonderful sandbox of our own, where we get to have these conversations amongst each other to decide, okay, if we're telling the president the most important things that we want to see happen, what would that look like? And we want to make sure that it's actionable and not, pie in the sky recommendations. And so seeing where we land on that amongst ourselves is very useful to understand and appreciate the benefits of allowing these conversations. I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is how hard the work of ethical AI, responsible, trustworthy AI is. I think if you talk to people in this space, they'll tell you that it actually requires resilience. And so the more that we can be doing to support them and to build trust that it is safe to do this work, that we respect this work, whether it's government support, you could see Kathy's comment. I mean, I hear that time and again. We have a podcast, In AI We Trust, and I do it with Kay Firth Butterfield of the World Economic Forum. And so many of our guests, including those who have participated on the badge program, who are on our show, will tell you this is really hard work. And nobody wants to be seen as the pause or the stop button. Anybody working in this space wants to support innovation, but you also want to make sure that you're helping to create that innovation that helps doctors identify cancer, not the one that helps the doctors misdiagnose because they didn't realize that the patients in front of them are underrepresented in the data sets for which their AI program was trained. So all that is to say, I think the more we can do to support people doing this work and bring together multi-stakeholder groups, again, in our badge program, I know I keep talking about it, but I just love the work. And I love that it's a cross section of chief AI officers, chief privacy officers. They can have these safe conversations together under Chatham House rules, and we're able to really go deep and move forward in a way that everyone needs to, who wants to move forward in this space.
Very well said, Miriam. Thank you. So Giovanni, any thoughts on that, given that you sit in a unique place inside an enterprise, and I know we've talked in the past about values and how a CEO can make a difference, because I think at the end of the day, how these practitioners can be supported is if they're part of an organization where these kind of things are built into the values of the company, so it's not something being done off on the side and everybody's kind of throwing, taking pot shots. So would be great to get your last comments on this, Giovanni, because you have a unique perspective on it.
Yeah, and I'm maybe an optimist. I believe that we as a community and as a practice are necessary now, but I hope we will be unnecessary over time. That's the main thing. I believe that we need to build understanding, learning, and maturity. We need the sandboxes to test and innovate. We need the legislative movement to shift the paradigm that we've lived under for the past 2-3 decades. We need a shift to understand how important it is that we're humans after all. And even if we utilize technology, we just need to see that it do good and to redesign our processes in business and digital technology to really benefit for good in all its dimensions. So we'll see a buildup of this practice and buildup of maturity, but towards the end, this should be something that just comes natural. Everything that we should buy off from the shelf by our technology vendors should be ethical by design. The data should be used in a way that is ethical and unbiased, that we actually safeguard and see it as natural that outcomes are positive, otherwise we rectify it. And I think that's the key thing, that approach we already want to take here already from the start, is that we are values-led as a company. And we want to see that no matter if we utilize advanced technology or are fully analog in our interaction, humans as humans, we would want to have the same output and effect. And over time, we'll build this maturity, we'll build understanding. It's a part of digital transformation. But over time, hopefully, this will be just normal way of working. And we'll look upon back here to the years of 2022 and think like back then, where we're in the beginning of this tough journey, and we needed grit and resilience to kind of move it. But I think hopefully over time, we'll be able to move that dial to become a normal state going forward.
Very well said. I think enlightened self-interest, and I think any movement needs the early adopters, and I think folks like yourself who are on this call and the great work Miriam and others like Navrina and Anna are doing, I think this is all good. So thank you so much for your time. Unless there's any last questions, I want to be respectful for everybody's time here. We're getting close to the hour. So if there's any questions, let us know. If not, we will basically end now. And thank you so much, Miriam and Giovanni, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.